It's been the worst time of my life, Joe. If somebody accused me of raping them or hurting them, I have a 22-year-old daughter. I would never hurt anyone.
Breaking news has shaken Hollywood. Clifton Powell's sentence is final. From a tough childhood in Southeast Washington, D.C., to blockbuster roles in Friday and Ray, Powell built a name that fans recognized everywhere. But scandals, shocking accusations, gambling, divorce, and discrimination nearly destroyed everything. Was this the end of a career, or the beginning of a darker truth Hollywood never wanted you to hear? The final verdict is here, and it changes everything. Let's find out. The shockwave: has Hollywood just lost Clifton Powell? Breaking news out of Hollywood has stunned fans and industry insiders alike. ABC has reported that Clifton Powell's sentence is final, and the announcement has left many wondering whether one of the most recognizable faces in film is now facing the end of his career. Clifton Powell may not be a name everyone immediately recognizes, but his face is unforgettable. For more than 3 decades, he appeared in film after film, building a reputation as one of Hollywood's most reliable character actors. His breakthrough came in 1993 with Menace II Society, a gritty urban drama that captured the harsh realities of street life. Powell's performance earned attention for its raw energy and his ability to bring authenticity to the screen. Soon after, he became a familiar presence in the Friday series, where his sharp timing and comedic delivery made him a fan favorite. Powell had a range that few actors could match, moving seamlessly from hard-edged dramas to light-hearted comedies and proving that he could inhabit almost any role he was given. By 2004, Powell had cemented his reputation when he appeared in the critically acclaimed biopic Ray, starring Jamie Foxx. His performance was so strong that it earned him a nomination for an NAACP Image Award, placing him in the spotlight alongside some of Hollywood's most respected actors. Along the way, he appeared in films such as Dead Presidents, Why Do Fools Fall in Love, Rush Hour, and Next Friday, leaving an impression on audiences long after the credits rolled. Over the years, Powell amassed more than 100 credits across film and television. He became the man Hollywood called when they needed someone unforgettable, whether it was a villain, a father figure, a hustler, or a cop. What made Powell unique was not just the volume of work he took on, but the versatility he displayed across genres and styles. He could terrify with a menacing glare, deliver humor with perfect timing, and ground a dramatic scene with quiet emotional depth. That versatility earned him the respect of directors, casting agents, and audiences alike, building a career most actors could only dream of. Yet for all of his professional success, Powell's personal and professional journey was far from smooth. And now, the news of his so-called final sentence forces us to examine both the triumphs and the troubles that defined his life in Hollywood. How could a man who worked so hard to rise from obscurity to recognition, who survived the harsh streets of Southeast Washington, D.C., and turned his life into a Hollywood story, now find himself at the center of a breaking news bulletin that sounds like the end of the road? The contrast between success and downfall has rarely been so stark. On one hand, Powell was the actor who seemed to be everywhere, appearing in blockbusters and cult classics alike. On the other, his off-screen struggles and controversies were mounting, creating a parallel story far less glamorous than the red carpets and flashing cameras suggested. That is why the announcement of his final sentence carries such weight. It is not just about one man. It is about an entire career being placed under the harshest light imaginable. Hollywood has seen many scandals before, but this case raises a painful question: when the industry and the public make up their minds, can a man ever truly recover? The case that nearly ended everything. Newly resurfaced details confirm that Clifton Powell's long-running legal battle, which began more than a decade ago, has now been fully settled, with no criminal charges upheld. For years, the story was whispered about, but only now is the full picture becoming clear. A man once known for his commanding presence in more than 100 movies found himself brought to his knees. But the most disturbing part of this saga is how much damage had already been done long before the courts made their decision. How does an allegation with no proven foundation nearly destroy the career of a man who fought so hard to build his life? And more importantly, what does this say about the power of public opinion in the entertainment world? The ordeal began in the late summer of 2011, when a woman using the pseudonym Keontae Myers came forward with shocking accusations against Powell. According to her claims, an encounter in a hotel room in New Orleans crossed a line, beginning as consensual and then becoming, in her words, too aggressive to continue. She alleged that when she asked him to stop, he ignored her request and continued anyway. Myers, who at the time worked as a cocktail waitress at Harrah's Casino, filed a complaint that quickly spread through the press. Outlets such as TMZ picked it up, reporting on the incident with blunt headlines that left little room for nuance or interpretation. For Powell, the shift was devastating. Overnight, the actor who had made audiences laugh in Friday and moved them in Ray was being painted in an entirely different light, with his name linked to one of the most serious accusations a man can face. From the beginning, Powell denied the claims unequivocally. Through his representative, he issued a statement declaring that the accusations were false and that he intended to pursue every possible legal remedy against the woman who made them. But once such allegations enter the public sphere, the damage begins immediately. Even though the original criminal investigation was dismissed for lack of evidence, the headlines did not disappear. Myers later pursued a civil case against Powell, seeking financial damages in excess of $75,000. That meant that even without a criminal conviction, Powell would remain entangled in a legal battle that could drag on for years, forcing him to defend not only his freedom but also his reputation. The civil case became the center of Powell's life, taking up time, money, and emotional energy. Unlike criminal court, where the standard is beyond a reasonable doubt, civil cases operate on what lawyers call a preponderance of the evidence. In other words, instead of proving guilt to near certainty, the question becomes whether it is more likely than not that the accusation is true. For celebrities, this creates an especially dangerous environment, because even the suggestion of wrongdoing can be enough to stain a career, regardless of what the courts eventually decide. Powell understood this clearly. In later interviews, he explained that the worst part was not the legal process itself, but the erosion of trust, the loss of work, and the realization that many people had already made up their minds. Hollywood is not known for patience or loyalty when scandal erupts. The entertainment industry, worth billions, relies heavily on reputation and public image, and studios are quick to distance themselves from any actor whose name becomes controversial. For Powell, the impact was immediate. Roles he had already secured began to disappear. Producers grew hesitant, unwilling to risk negative press. Television appearances that once would have been his were suddenly cut short after only a few episodes. Powell recalled one specific show where he expected to appear in 7 or 8 episodes, only to see his part vanish after the second. The only explanation was the cloud of allegations hanging over him. The emotional toll was even heavier than the financial loss. Powell described the period as the most painful experience of his life since the death of his father decades earlier. As a father himself, the accusations cut deeply not only because of what they implied, but because of how his own children might see him in the wake of such headlines. He maintained his innocence throughout, but he could not shield his family from the whispers, the rumors, and the doubts that followed them everywhere. When he walked down the street, he sensed suspicion in strangers' eyes. Online, anonymous comments painted him as guilty before any court had even examined the evidence. In a business where public perception often matters more than facts, Powell had effectively been sentenced by the court of public opinion. The civil case moved slowly through the system. For 4 long years, Powell lived under its shadow, struggling to maintain both his career and his personal life while lawyers and judges debated the details. In 2017, the case was finally thrown out due to insufficient evidence. By 2018, his own counterclaims for defamation and emotional distress were also dismissed, bringing the matter to a close. Yet even in victory, Powell found himself confronting a strange reality. While the courts had cleared him, Hollywood had not. That is the heart of Powell's tragedy, and it is where the phrase "final sentence" takes on its deepest meaning. He was never found guilty of any crime, but the sentence he carried was one imposed by reputation loss. In an industry where perception can be more powerful than truth, the accusations themselves became the punishment. Looking at the facts, it is clear that Clifton Powell was never convicted of any offense. Yet looking at his career, the damage is undeniable. He lost roles, trust, and the steady momentum that had made him one of Hollywood's most dependable performers. The case dragged on long enough to derail critical years of his working life, years he can never get back. His experience shows that in Hollywood, the perception of guilt can sometimes carry more weight than actual evidence. A dismissed case should have completely freed him. Instead, it left a scar that never fully faded. colorism, discrimination, and Hollywood politics. Clifton Powell's career was shaped not only by the personal troubles that dragged him into courtrooms and tabloids, but also by systemic barriers that have existed in Hollywood for generations. Powell has spoken openly about how casting decisions were influenced not by his talent or professionalism, but by the shade of his skin. He recalled situations where producers or network executives dismissed him outright, saying he was too dark for the role or, in one especially painful instance, that he was so dark he might scare viewers. Hearing these rejections repeatedly left Powell questioning whether his years of training and proven track record even mattered when the first thing people noticed was his complexion. Hollywood has long operated on the belief that marketability is tied to relatability, and relatability is often judged by how closely an actor fits Eurocentric beauty standards. In practical terms, that meant darker-skinned actors were frequently excluded from leading roles, especially in romance-driven stories or roles requiring audiences to connect sympathetically with the character. Powell's talent was undeniable, but these systemic preferences placed him at a disadvantage that no amount of hard work could fully erase. What makes this reality even more disturbing is the contradiction it exposed. Powell was often praised for playing gritty, intimidating, or menacing characters. Yet when it came time to cast someone sensitive, charming, or vulnerable, his skin tone was suddenly treated as a problem. That double standard limited his growth as an actor, confining him to certain archetypes while shutting him out of opportunities that could have expanded his public image. It also contributed to the cycle of misperception that followed him during his legal troubles, because audiences were already used to seeing him in roles that highlighted the darker side of human behavior. Powell's frustration did not end at the casting table. Within the black entertainment community itself, he noticed a damaging tendency for people to criticize one another publicly, especially in mainstream outlets that were already quick to dismiss black artistry. In one instance, he found himself at odds with acclaimed director Spike Lee after Lee made remarks Powell saw as unnecessarily harsh toward another black actor. Powell responded publicly, saying he did not respect anyone, including himself, his son, or his daughter, who would go to crossover press and tear down a fellow black entertainer trying to succeed in the industry. That stance reflected his belief in solidarity, even in an environment where competition was intense and opportunities were limited. For Powell, tearing one another down only reinforced the systemic barriers already making success harder to achieve. That same determination to stand firm despite barriers is part of what made his NAACP Image Award nomination for Ray so significant. That nomination was not just recognition for a single performance. It was validation that his work mattered beyond the restrictions of Hollywood bias. In Ray, Powell played Jeff Brown, the loyal road manager of Ray Charles, and his nuanced performance stood alongside Jamie Foxx's Oscar-winning portrayal of the music legend. The recognition proved that his contributions could not be ignored, even in an environment that often overlooked actors like him. Still, the fact remains that opportunities for darker-skinned actors were consistently fewer, and Powell's career bears the marks of that discrimination. This bias did not always appear loudly or openly. Sometimes it was hidden behind phrases like market concerns, target demographics, or creative vision. Those words sound neutral, but they often conceal decisions rooted in prejudice. For Powell, that meant constantly fighting not just for roles, but for the right to be considered equally in the first place. Personal struggles, temptations, and loss. Clifton Powell's rise in Hollywood is often remembered through the lens of the characters he played, but the man behind the screen was shaped by a childhood that forced him to grow up far too quickly. Born and raised in Southeast Washington, D.C., Powell came of age in one of the city's toughest neighborhoods, a place where crime, poverty, and limited opportunity shaped the lives of many young men. When he was only 4 years old, his mother died, leaving him in the care of a father who struggled with alcoholism and could not provide the stability a child desperately needs. Powell often described those early years as a constant battle to stay out of trouble, surrounded by friends and peers who were pulled into dangerous paths leading to jail or worse. For him, survival meant leaning on mentors and the small network of family members who stepped in to keep him from being swallowed by the streets. That same determination to stand firm despite barriers is part of what made his NAACP Image Award nomination for Ray so significant. That nomination was not just recognition for a single performance. It was validation that his work mattered beyond the restrictions of Hollywood bias. In Ray, Powell played Jeff Brown, the loyal road manager of Ray Charles, and his nuanced performance stood alongside Jamie Foxx's Oscar-winning portrayal of the music legend. The recognition proved that his contributions could not be ignored, even in an environment that often overlooked actors like him. Still, the fact remains that opportunities for darker-skinned actors were consistently fewer, and Powell's career bears the marks of that discrimination. This bias did not always appear loudly or openly. Sometimes it was hidden behind phrases like market concerns, target demographics, or creative vision. Those words sound neutral, but they often conceal decisions rooted in prejudice. For Powell, that meant constantly fighting not just for roles, but for the right to be considered equally in the first place. Personal struggles, temptations, and loss. Clifton Powell's rise in Hollywood is often remembered through the lens of the characters he played, but the man behind the screen was shaped by a childhood that forced him to grow up far too quickly. Born and raised in Southeast Washington, D.C., Powell came of age in one of the city's toughest neighborhoods, a place where crime, poverty, and limited opportunity shaped the lives of many young men. When he was only 4 years old, his mother died, leaving him in the care of a father who struggled with alcoholism and could not provide the stability a child desperately needs. Powell often described those early years as a constant battle to stay out of trouble, surrounded by friends and peers who were pulled into dangerous paths leading to jail or worse. For him, survival meant leaning on mentors and the small network of family members who stepped in to keep him from being swallowed by the streets.